Hi, in this video we'll talk about proportions and percentages. So this is a great place to start in this course because proportions and percentages provide a kind of simple illustration of very important concepts in statistics. So like many of the math classes that you've probably taken in the past, we are going to use numbers and mathematical concepts to answer real-world questions. But in statistics, we really place a heavy emphasis on the fact that these numbers represent concepts, right? So when we talk about numbers, we're referring to values of real world concepts. And so throughout the course, we will rarely talk about numbers in the absence of the concepts that they represent. And so if you recall from your research methods course, you may have talked about concepts and the fact that when we begin to quantify concepts and we start talking about values related to those concepts, right, we're getting into issues of measurement. And anytime we measure a concept, we're likely transforming that concept into what we call a variable in our field. And so a strict definition of a variable is just anything that is free to vary, anything that varies. And so we'll talk about how to quantify that variation in research methods. And then here in statistics, we will take those quantities, right, and we'll analyze that. And so when we talk about data, what we're really talking about is values that represent where a person or where an object falls along that variable, right? And so all of our numbers that we use for data represent scores on a particular variable. In this activity, our variable of interest is calories. And so, of course, we know that calories can vary across different foods that you eat. And so I can compare the calories of different foods by looking at the back of a product and examining the nutritional information. So in this activity, we are going to look at nutritional information that is available online for many popular chain restaurants. In particular, we are going to look at the McDonald's nutritional information. So your activity, you're asked to document and can work with the nutritional information for the Big Mac. So to switch things up a little bit for this video, we're going to be looking at the Quarter Pounder with cheese for this video activity. And so if we look at the McDonald's menu, we can click on our product that we're interested in. So I'm clicking here on the Quarter Pounder with cheese. You see that it has 520 total calories. But if we go down and we expand out the nutritional information, we can get a lot more information in the nutrition summary. So we can see that we have 520 calories, we have 26 grams of fat, we have 42 grams of carbohydrates, and 30 grams for protein. We can also see other types of information like saturated fat, calcium, iron, vitamin D, etc. And so this provides all of the needed information to fill out the first part of our activity. And so I'm going to switch screens so that we can fill that in. Okay, so in my activity, it is asking for the information from the McDonald's website. So for mine, I'm looking at the Quarter Pounder with cheese. You'll be looking at the Big Mac. But for my Quarter Pounder with cheese, we said that we have 520 total calories. I found that there were 30 grams for protein listed. There were 26 grams for fat listed. For carbohydrates, it was 42 grams. And for sodium, it was 1,140 milligrams. Now, here it asks for the calories from fat. And the website does not specifically state how many of, these total 520 calories comes from fat. So we have to do a little bit of calculation. And so if you look online, it's estimated that each gram of fat corresponds to 9 calories. And so we know that the Quarter Pounder with cheese had 26 grams of fat. And so we're saying that, okay, we have 9 calories for each one of those grams. And it's pretty easy to calculate out a close estimate, the amount of calories that is being contributed by the fat content of our Quarter Pounder with cheese. So we had 26 grams, and we multiply that by 9 calories per gram. And so we would get a total of 234 calories from fat that we're going to see here with our Quarter Pounder with cheese. And so this next question is asking us to start to look at ratios and then proportions and percentages. And so this is really important when we're thinking about statistics, because again, we're talking about using numbers that represent values on a variable, using those numbers to answer real world questions. And very often, these real world questions pertain to the relationship between concepts. And so with ratio, proportion, percentage, what we're really talking about is relationships between values or relationships between numbers. And so this may seem very kind of abstract and confusing if you think about these numbers as independent of the concepts that they represent. But once we put this in a real world context that many of us are familiar with, like nutritional information and calorie counts, it becomes more clear, right, how we're using ratios, proportions, and percentages, and how this information makes sense, right? Because we can think from a real world concept how these values, or here how these numbers relate to each other. And so we can look at what is the ratio of calories from fat to total calories. So we calculated the calories from fat as 234. You can think of this as a ratio to the total calories of 520. Right, so essentially, what's the relationship between the calories contributed by fat and the overall total calories? And so this kind of gives us an idea of how fatty is the Quarter Pounder with cheese. We have all these different grams that's being contributed by protein, carbohydrates, also fat. So what is contributing the most really to the calorie count? You can imagine that if you have fat contributing substantially to your calorie count, then that's going to be a less nutritional meal than perhaps one where you have protein or maybe even carbohydrates, depending upon what your diet is, contributing to the calories. So we have 234, and I'm just going to go ahead and divide this out. So I'm going to do 234 divided by 520. So I get 0.45. Okay. If we want to think about, okay, what percentage of total calories are calories from fat, then again, we're saying, okay, we have calories from fat to total calories. When we divided that out, we got a proportion of 0.45. We know that to get our percentage, we have to move this decimal point 2 spots or multiply by 100, which will give us 45%. So 45% of our calories is due to fat when we're looking at the quarter pounder with cheese. And so that gives us information for answering question 3. So we find that Lori learned from her health class that a healthy percentage of calories from fat is 25 to 35%. So does a quarter pounder with cheese meet this standard? Well, no, right? We're actually quite a bit higher than what we would want for a healthy meal. And so this is a no for this question. And so the next question asks us to make some edits. Can we remove certain ingredients potentially to change this percentage due to fat? And so once we start to make alterations to our quarter pounder with cheese, then we're going to change very likely the total number of calories. We can also change the amount of fat grams. And so really what we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of fat, but really kind of targeting this percentage, right? To make sure that the percentage of calories due to fat is lowered. And so we'll switch back to the McDonald's website to look at this tool to edit the ingredients. And so if we look here below our nutrition summary, we have the nutrition calculator. And so I'm going to click on that. And we have our same information, our summary, but down here we can edit the ingredients. And so that's what I'm going to choose to do. And so we can see all the ingredients of our quarter pounder with cheese. We have a beef patty, a bun, cheese, ketchup, pickle slices, onions, and mustard. And so since I really want to reduce the fat, I'm going to kind of think carefully about which changes, right? For instance, I don't think really the onions are contributing a lot to fat. I'm gonna try taking off the cheese, right? So we have just a quarter pounder. What happens if we just lose the cheese? And so we've taken off 100 calories just from cheese. And then our grams of fat have reduced quite a bit. So let's do a quick calculation. We have 18 grams of fat. We have 9 calories per gram. I'm going to do 18 multiplied by 9. So I have 162 calories that is due to fat out of 420 total calories. And so 162 divided by 420 is going to give me roughly 0.39 or 39%. And so as we saw before, 25 to 35 represents a healthy meal. We're slightly above that at 39%. And so let's see if I make one more alteration. So I have taken off the cheese. There's not a lot of ingredients here. I'm wondering, I don't really think that ketchup is going to have a lot of fat in it, but let's see, we were at 18 grams. What if I take off ketchup? Oh, no, we don't change the grams of fat at all. And so how about I will take off the bun. So not much of a sandwich anymore, but I have reduced my grams of fat slightly to 16 grams. So let's calculate that out really quickly. And so I'm actually going to see if I can calculate it out so that you can see what I'm doing here on the screen. So now we have 16 grams of fat. We know that if we multiply that by 9 calories per fat gram, we get our total amount of fat, or sorry, total amount of calories due to fat. So if I multiply 16 times 9, I get 144. And then we have 240 total calories. So if I divide my 144 by 240 total calories, then I get a proportion of 0.6. Oh, so I'm actually going in the opposite direction here than what I want to. So by removing my bun, I am substantially reducing the amount of calories from carbohydrates, which means that from the perspective of ratios and proportion, that we have a higher percentage when we move this, multiply by 100, 60% of calories due to fat. So that's actually quite a bit worse than when I had left the bun and just removed the cheese. And so I guess my best case scenario here, based on the edits that I've made, is to leave the bun and just remove the cheese. And it's still a little bit higher than the recommended percentage of calories due to fat, but it's the closest that we've had so far. All right, we will switch back to our document to answer our last question. Okay, and so for our question 4, I have just typed in what we discussed. So I decided to remove the cheese. That produced 18 grams of fat as opposed to the 26 grams of fat that we had originally. I multiplied that by 9 calories per gram of fat to give us 162 calories due to fat. Divide that by the 420 total calories based on my substitution. And that gave us a proportion of 0.39, which we then multiplied by 100 to get the 39% of total calories that are calories from fat based on our substitution or edit that removed the cheese. Now, for our last question, we're going back to the original quarter pounder with cheese. We're looking at this 520 total calories. And this question asks us to do something that, from a real world perspective, maybe many of us have made a similar calculation. So again, taking this idea of proportions and percentages and examining how we can use these to answer real world questions. If we've made this decision to eat something that's kind of unhealthy, well then how much would we need to exercise to burn those calories? And so in this particular question, we're looking at Lori, and Lori wants to know how long does she need to walk to burn off the calories in a quarter pounder with cheese. So she's already done some background research and has discovered that if she walks at a pace of 2.5 miles per hour on level ground, she burns 26 calories in 10 minutes. And so if she burns 26 calories in 10 minutes, how long will it take her to burn 520 total calories? So we know that's going to take her longer than 10 minutes, right? But how much longer? And so there's a couple of different ways that you could approach answering this question. But what I'm going to do is first figure out, she burns 26 calories in 10 minutes. How many calories does she burn per minute? So she burns 26 calories in 10 minutes. Right? How many calories does she burn per minute? So I just divide this out. 26 over 10 would give us 2.6 calories per minute. All right, if she burns 2.6 calories per minute, then it's a pretty simple calculation for me to determine, well, how many minutes will it take her to burn 520 calories? So I have my 520 calories. We know that she burns 2.6 calories per minute. So I'm going to take my 520 divided by 2.6, which would give us 200 minutes. And just to double check that, we're going to say, okay, I found 200 minutes. Let me calculate that out. She walks for 200 minutes, burning 2.6 calories per minute. How many calories would she burn? And of course, it gives us 520 calories, which is what we were looking for. So it would take her 200 minutes of walking to burn off the calories in a quarter pounder with cheese. I would actually like to know, since we don't normally think in terms of 200 minutes, I want to see, well, how many hours is that? Well, I know that there are 60 minutes in an hour. So I'm actually going to take my 200 divided by 60 minutes in an hour, and I get approximately 3.33, so 3 1/3 hours of walking. So quite a bit of exercise that Lori is having to engage in to burn off these calories. So try out your version of the activity. The only difference is that you're doing all of these calculations based on the Big Mac instead of the quarter pounder with cheese.